In August 1945, when the Pacific War was gradually coming to an end, realizing that the time was ripe, the Americans began planning to grow mushrooms on the Japanese mainland. These were not ordinary mushrooms, but a type of weapon, gas with extremely powerful destructive power that has never appeared on Earth. In just a few seconds, brilliant light flashed, and terrible heat erupted with a heat equivalent to the temperature of the sun. The firestorm brought with it radiation. Deadly radiation covers all living creatures, which is an atomic bomb. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the events in which 2 atomic bombs were used by the United States Army under orders from President Harry S. Truman during World War II in the final days of World War II. Second World in Japan. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb named Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, the second bomb named Fat Man exploded over the city of Nagasaki. There are many reasons why the exact number of deaths is inconsistent. The figures are different because they are compiled at different times. Many victims die after months or even years from the consequences of radiation. There are also pressures for numbers to be exaggerated or minimized for reasons of political propaganda. According to estimates, 140,000 Hiroshima residents died from the explosion and its consequences. The death toll in Nagasaki was 74,000. In both cities, the majority of the dead were civilians. But why did the U.S. drop the second atomic bomb after destroying Hiroshima? The public reason is to quickly end the war with Japan, ending World War II. But behind that may be another motive. Since the Americans dropped the second atomic bomb on Nagasaki, Japan on August 9, 1945, one question has persisted. Was that scale of death and destruction needed to end World War II? World War II. American leaders thought so. Just 16 hours after the American B-29 bomber nicknamed Enola Gay shocked the world by dropping the first A-bomb named Little Boy on Hiroshima City. The White House released a statement from President Harry S. Truman. In addition to introducing the world to the top-secret atomic research program, known as the Manhattan Project, President Truman emphasized the threat that nuclear weapons pose to Japan, the only remaining rival in the Great War. If the Japanese did not accept the terms of unconditional surrender drawn up by Allied leaders in the Potsdam Declaration, Truman wrote, they could expect a rain of destruction from the air, as yet unheard of, ever seen on this earth. Even before President Truman made that announcement, a second atomic bomb attack was ready. According to an executive order drafted in late July 1945 by Lieutenant General Leslie Groves of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, director of the Manhattan Project, the President authorized the dropping of additional bombs on the cities of Kokura, present-day Kitakyushu, Niigata, and Nagasaki as soon as weather conditions permit. Nagasaki was not the original target. Early in the morning of August 9, 1945, the B-29 Boxcar took off from Tinian Island in the Western Pacific, carrying a 454 kilograms plutonium-based nuclear bomb, nicknamed Fat Man, towards Kokura, where Japan's large arsenal is located. Realizing that Kokura was covered by clouds, the Boxcar crew decided to divert to their second target, Nagasaki. Fat Guy exploded at 11:02 local time, at an altitude of 500 meters. This bomb caused about half as many deaths as the Boy uranium-based bomb dropped on Hiroshima 3 days earlier, despite having a destructive power of 21 kilotons, 40% greater. Even so, the destructive power of the bomb was still terrible. Nearly 40,000 people died immediately, and 1/3 of Nagasaki City was destroyed. The second display of atomic bomb power caused panic in Tokyo, and the next morning there were signs that the Japanese Empire was ready to surrender, U.S. President Truman later wrote in his memoirs. On August 15, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's unconditional surrender, ending World War II. According to Mr. Truman and others in the U.S. administration, the use of atomic bombs was intended to shorten the war in the Pacific, avoiding the need for the United States to send troops to Japan and saving the lives of thousands of American soldiers. Controversy after the atomic disaster. In early 1947, when pressed to respond to growing criticism surrounding the use of the atomic bomb, U.S. Secretary of State Henry Stimson wrote in Harper's Magazine that by July 1945, there was still no sign of the atomic bomb, signal of any weakening of the Japanese will to fight. let alone accepting unconditional surrender. Meanwhile, the U.S. is planning to strengthen air and sea siege on Japan, increase strategic bombing, and is ready to send troops to Japan in November of that year. We calculate that if we do not carry out this plan, the major battles will not stop until the second half of 1946 at the earliest, Mr. Stimson wrote. I have been informed that such operations could cause over 1 million casualties among U.S. forces alone. Despite the arguments of Secretary Stimson and others, historians have long continued to debate whether the United States acted reasonably in using the atomic bomb on Japan and using it twice. Civilian and military officials publicly said that the two bombings were not a necessary military response. Even the famous American hawk General Curtis LeMay told the press in September 1945 that the atomic bomb had nothing to do with ending the war. Such statements have led many historians, such as Gar Alperovitz, author of The Decision to Use the Atomic Bomb, to argue that the real purpose of the atomic bombing was to win the upper hand over the Soviet Union. According to this line of judgment, the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki to display the power of its nuclear arsenal, ensuring its supremacy in the global power competition. Others argue that both attacks were simply an experiment to test how two types of atomic bombs, uranium-based and plutonium-based, developed by the Manhattan Project, worked. Admiral William Bull Halsey, commander of the U.S. Navy's Third Fleet, declared in 1946 that the first atomic bomb was an unnecessary experiment. They had this toy and wanted to test it, so they dropped the bomb. Was a second atomic bomb necessary to force Japan to surrender? The world may never know the answer. For his part, U.S. President Harry Truman seemed unshaken in his belief that the two bombings were justified. It was a terrible decision, but I made it, the 33rd President of the United States later wrote to his sister Mary. I made a decision to save 250,000 boys from America, and I would do it again under the same circumstances.